The morning sun painted the Chilean desert in shades of gold and orange. Dr. Elena Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she checked her equipment one more time. She had been working at this remote research station for 3 years now, studying life in one of the driest places on Earth. The Atacama Desert was perfect for her work because it was so much like other planets that scientists thought might have life somewhere out there. Elena loved her job, but some days the loneliness got to her. The nearest town was hours away, and her only company was the occasional research team that came to visit. Today was supposed to be just another normal day of collecting samples and running tests. That was before she saw the strange light in the sky. It happened around 10 in the morning. Elena was outside checking her weather instruments when something bright caught her eye. At first, she thought it might be a meteor or maybe a piece of space junk burning up in the atmosphere. But this light was different. It moved in ways that didn't make sense, zigzagging across the sky like it was trying to find somewhere to land. Then it crashed. The impact was about 2 miles from her station, sending up a cloud of dust that Elena could see even from that distance. Her scientist mind immediately started racing. Meteors didn't usually survive the trip through Earth's atmosphere in the desert. This could be something really special, maybe even worth publishing a paper about. Elena grabbed her emergency kit, jumped into her Jeep, and drove toward the crash site as fast as the rough desert terrain would allow. The whole way there, she kept telling herself it was probably just a chunk of rock from space. Nothing more exciting than that. She was completely wrong. When Elena reached the crash site, she found something that made her question everything. She thought she knew about the universe. There, half buried in the sand, was what could only be described as a ship, but it wasn't like any aircraft she had ever seen. The metal was smooth and silver, almost like liquid that had been frozen in place. There were no visible engines, no wings, no anything that looked like it belonged on Earth. Elena sat in her Jeep for a full 5 minutes just staring. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her camera. She had to document this. She had to prove to herself that she wasn't losing her mind in the desert heat. The ship was about the size of a small airplane, but shaped more like a teardrop. As Elena walked around it, looking for any kind of door or opening, she noticed that parts of the hull seemed to be damaged. There were cracks in the smooth surface, and some kind of pale blue liquid was leaking out and evaporating quickly in the dry air. Then she heard something that made her heart skip a beat. A sound was coming from inside the ship. It wasn't mechanical like an engine or a radio. It sounded almost like someone was in pain. Elena pressed her ear against the warm metal of the hull. Yes, there was definitely something alive in there. Her medical training kicked in immediately. Whatever was inside that ship needed help, and she was the only person for miles around who could provide it. Finding a way inside took almost an hour. Elena tried everything she could think of, from knocking to pushing on different parts of the hull. Finally, she placed her hand flat against what looked like a smooth panel near the front of the ship. The metal grew warm under her palm, and suddenly a section of the hull simply dissolved away, creating an opening just big enough for her to crawl through. The inside of the ship was even stranger than the outside. Everything glowed with a soft, blue light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. There were no seats or controls that Elena could recognize. Instead, the entire interior seemed to be designed for someone to lie down in the center, surrounded by what looked like flowing patterns of light. And lying in that center space was someone who was definitely not human. Elena's first thought was that she was looking at a person wearing some kind of costume or special effects makeup. The being was roughly human-shaped with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head where they should be. But the differences were immediately obvious. The skin had a faint silver tint to it, like metal that had been polished until it shone. The limbs were longer and thinner than human proportions would allow. And the face, while beautiful in its own way, had features that were just slightly wrong. The eyes were too large, the nose too small, the ears pointed at the tips. But what struck Elena most was how peaceful the being looked. Despite obviously being injured, there was something serene about the stranger's face. It reminded Elena of classical statues she had seen in museums, perfect but somehow not quite alive. Elena carefully checked for signs of life. There was definitely a pulse, though it was slower than a human heartbeat should be. The being was breathing, but each breath was deeper and less frequent than normal. Most importantly, Elena could see that several wounds on the being's arms and legs were bleeding that same pale blue liquid she had seen outside the ship. Her medical training took over completely. Elena didn't care if this person was from another planet or just someone in an incredibly good costume. Someone was hurt, and she was going to help them. Getting the unconscious being out of the ship and back to her research station was one of the most difficult things Elena had ever done. The stranger was surprisingly light, but the desert heat and her own shock made every step feel like running a marathon. By the time she got back to her station, Elena was exhausted and starting to question whether any of this was really happening. She set up the injured being in her small medical bay, which was really just a corner of her laboratory with a cot and some basic medical supplies. Elena had taken wilderness medicine courses as part of her training, so she knew how to handle emergencies, but nothing had prepared her for this. As she cleaned and bandaged the stranger's wounds, Elena noticed more details that convinced her this was definitely not human. The bone structure felt different under the skin. The blood, which was indeed blue, clotted much faster than human blood should. And the skin itself had a texture that was smoother than human skin, almost like silk. But the most amazing thing happened when the being started to wake up. Elena was sitting beside the cot, updating her notes, when she heard a soft sound. She looked up to see the largest, most beautiful eyes she had ever seen slowly opening. They were silver, like mirrors, and seemed to reflect light in ways that human eyes couldn't. The being sat up slowly, looking around Elena's laboratory with obvious confusion. When those silver eyes finally focused on Elena, the being spoke. The voice was soft and musical, definitely feminine, but the words were in no language Elena had ever heard. Elena tried Spanish, English, and even the little bit of Portuguese she remembered from college. Nothing seemed to work. The being listened carefully to each attempt, tilting her head like a curious bird, but clearly didn't understand. Then something amazing happened. The being reached out and gently touched Elena's forehead. Suddenly, Elena could understand her perfectly. "Where am I?" the being asked, though Elena realized the words weren't actually being spoken aloud. Somehow, they were communicating directly, mind to mind. "You're on Earth," Elena replied, not sure if she should think the words or say them out loud. "In Chile, South America. You were hurt in a crash. I brought you here to help you." The being's silver eyes grew even wider. "Earth?" she repeated. "But that's impossible. Earth is supposed to be uninhabited. Just simple life forms. Nothing intelligent." Elena almost laughed despite the strangeness of the situation. "Well, I hate to break it to you, but Earth has been full of intelligent life for quite a while now. I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez. I'm a scientist. What's your name?" The being was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena's face as if she were trying to solve a complicated puzzle. "My designation is Zara 5127 Alpha, she finally said, "but I think your people would just call me Zara." And that was how Elena met the first alien visitor to Earth, in a small research station in the middle of the Chilean desert, on what she had thought would be just another ordinary day. Over the next few hours, Elena learned that Zara truly was from another world, somewhere so far away that Earth appeared as nothing more than a tiny dot in their telescopes. Zara's people had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years, but they had never found another planet with intelligent life. Zara explained that her ship had been damaged in what she called a navigation error. She had been trying to study a nearby star when something went wrong with her ship's systems. Earth was the closest planet where she could attempt an emergency landing. What fascinated Elena most was how curious Zara was about everything. She asked questions about the simplest things, like why Elena kept plants in pots on her windowsill or why she had pictures of other people on her desk. It was as if the concept of decoration, or keeping mementos, was completely foreign to her. "Your people attach emotional significance to objects?" Zara asked, picking up a photo of Elena with her brother and his young son. "Of course," Elena replied. "That's my family. My brother Miguel and his son Carlos. I keep their picture because I love them and it makes me happy to see their faces." Zara stared at the photograph for a long time, as if she were studying a specimen under a microscope. "Love," she repeated slowly. "This is a concept my people abandoned long ago. We found that emotions interfered with logical thinking." Elena Kuti. The first week with Zara was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Every morning, she would wake up to find the alien woman sitting perfectly still by the window, watching the sunrise with the same intense focus that Elena used to study her scientific samples. Zara never seemed to sleep the way humans did. Instead, she would enter what she called a rest cycle for about 3 hours each night, during which she remained completely motionless, but somehow still aware of everything around her. "Your son is quite beautiful," Zara said one morning as Elena made her coffee. "On my world, we have 2 stars, and they never set at the same time. There is always light in the sky." "Don't you miss it?" Elena asked, settling down with her warm mug. "Your home, I mean." Zara considered this question for a long moment, tilting her head in that bird-like way she had. "Miss implies an emotional attachment to something that is absent. My people do not experience such feelings. We simply adapt to new circumstances." But Elena was beginning to notice that Zara wasn't quite as emotionally empty as she claimed to be. When Elena played music while she worked, Zara would stop whatever she was doing and listen with obvious fascination. When a desert fox appeared near the research station one evening, Zara watched it for hours, asking dozens of questions about why it moved the way it did and what purpose its fluffy tail served. Most interesting of all was how Zara reacted to Elena's daily video calls with her research supervisor back at the university. She would hover nearby, listening to every word, clearly puzzled by the casual way Elena and Dr. Patterson joked with each other or asked about each other's families. "Why does Dr. Patterson inquire about your physical health when he can clearly see that you are functioning normally?" Zara asked after one such call. "Because he cares about me," Elena explained. "When people care about each other, they check in to make sure everything is okay. It's not just about physical health. It's about emotional well-being, too." "Emotional well-being," Zara repeated, as if she were memorizing a new scientific term. "This is important to your species?" "Very important. Humans need connection with other humans. We need to feel loved and cared for. Without that, we get lonely and sad." Zara spent the rest of that day following Elena around, observing her interactions with everything from the potted plants she watered to the way she spoke gently to her equipment when it wasn't working properly. It was like having a very polite, very curious shadow. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Elena's phone rang earlier than usual. The moment she heard her brother Miguel's voice, she knew something was terribly wrong. "Elena, I need you to sit down," Miguel said, his voice shaking in a way she had never heard before. "There's been an accident." The world seemed to stop moving as Miguel told her about the car crash. He had been driving home from work when a drunk driver ran a red light. Miguel was in the hospital with serious injuries, but he was going to be okay. The other driver hadn't been so lucky, but that wasn't the worst part. "Carlos was with me," Miguel whispered through the phone. "He's physically fine, just some bruises and a broken arm. But Elena, he won't talk. He won't eat. The doctors say he's in shock from seeing the accident happen, and the social workers are here asking about family because I'm going to be in the hospital for weeks." Elena's heart broke as she listened to her brother cry. Carlos was only 7 years old, and he had already lost his mother to cancer 2 years earlier. Now his father was badly hurt, and the little boy was alone and scared in a hospital room hundreds of miles away. "I'm coming to get him," Elena said without hesitation. "Right now. Today." "Elena, you can't. You have your research, your work. You live in the middle of nowhere. Carlos needs stability, needs to be in school with other children." "Carlos needs family," Elena said firmly. "He needs someone who loves him. Everything else, we'll figure out as we go." When Elena hung up the phone, she realized that Zara had been listening to the entire conversation. The alien woman was staring at her with those large silver eyes, looking completely confused. "You are going to abandon your important work too? Retrieve a young human who is not genetically related to you?" Zara asked. "He's my nephew, my family. Of course I'm going to get him. But this will create significant complications for your life. You will have to alter your living situation, change your work schedule, spend considerable resources on his care and education. From a logical standpoint, this makes no sense." Elena paused in her frantic packing to look at Zara. "You're right. From a logical standpoint, it probably doesn't make sense. But love isn't logical, Zara. Love means you do whatever it takes to take care of the people who matter to you, even when it's difficult or inconvenient." Zara followed Elena around the research station as she made arrangements with her supervisor, packed bags for both of them, and prepared to leave everything behind for an indefinite period. The alien woman asked questions about every decision Elena made, clearly trying to understand the reasoning behind actions that seemed completely irrational to her. "What if the child does not want to live with you?" Zara asked as they loaded the Jeep. "Then we'll work through it together. Carlos is scared and hurting right now. He needs time and patience and love. And if caring for him prevents you from continuing your scientific research," Elena stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Zara. "Then I'll find a different job. There are more important things in life than work, Zara. Carlos is more important than any research project." The drive to the airport was long and dusty, and Zara spent most of it in silence, staring out the window at the passing landscape. Elena could tell that the alien woman was processing everything she had witnessed, trying to fit it into her understanding of logical behavior. When they finally reached the city, Zara's amazement at human civilization provided a brief distraction from Elena's worry about Carlos. The alien woman had never seen so many humans in one place, had never observed the complex ways they interacted with each other. Every traffic light, every street vendor, every person walking a dog was a source of fascination. But it was at the hospital where Zara witnessed something that would change her understanding of humanity forever. Elena rushed through the corridors until she found Carlos's room. Her nephew was sitting in a hospital bed that looked far too big for his small frame, his left arm in a bright blue cast. He was staring out the window, not responding to the nurse who was trying to get him to eat some soup. The moment Carlos saw Elena, his carefully maintained composure crumbled. He burst into tears and reached for her with his good arm, and Elena swept him into the biggest, gentlest hug she could manage. "Tia Elena," Carlos sobbed against her shoulder. "I was so scared. Papa got hurt and there was blood and the car made terrible noises, and I thought he was going to die like Mama did." Elena held him close, whispering soothing words in Spanish while tears streamed down her own face. "I'm here now, mijo. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Papa is going to be okay, and you're going to come stay with me until he gets better." From the doorway, Zara watched this reunion with growing amazement. She observed how Elena's presence immediately calmed the distressed child, how Carlos's rigid posture relaxed the moment he felt safe in his aunt's arms. She watched Elena sacrifice her own emotional control to provide comfort to someone else, putting Carlos's needs ahead of her own grief and worry. For the first time in her life, Zara was witnessing pure, unconditional love in action, and she found herself completely fascinated by its power. When Carlos finally looked up and saw Zara standing in the doorway, his eyes grew wide with surprise, rather than fear. "Tia Elena," he whispered, "who is the Silver Lady?" Elena glanced back at Zara, suddenly realizing that she had some explaining to do, but before she could speak, Carlos surprised them both. "Are you an angel?" he asked Zara, directly. "Mama used to tell me that angels watch over people when they're scared." Zara stepped into the room, moving with her usual graceful precision. She studied Carlos with the same intense curiosity she applied to everything else, but there was something different in her expression now. Something softer. "I am not an angel," Zara said gently. "I am just someone who is learning about your world." Carlos nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Tia Elena teaches me about the world too. She's really good at it." And in that moment, looking at the small, brave boy who had just accepted an alien woman as naturally as he would accept a new teacher, Zara began to understand that she was about to learn lessons that no amount of logic or scientific observation could have prepared her for. The first few weeks back at the research station were harder than Elena had expected. Carlos barely spoke during the day, spending most of his time sitting by the window drawing pictures with his good hand. His drawings were all the same. Dark, cars with broken pieces scattered around them. Elena's heart ached every time she saw him working on another one, but the child psychologist she spoke with over video calls assured her that this was Carlos's way of processing his trauma. Zara watched all of this with growing fascination. She had been studying human behavior for weeks now, but Carlos was different from Elena. Where Elena's emotions were steady and purposeful, Carlos's feelings seemed to change like desert weather. Sunshine one moment, storms the next. "The small human's emotional patterns are highly irregular," Zara observed one evening as Elena prepared dinner. "His distress levels spike without apparent external triggers." "He's having nightmares," Elena explained, stirring the soup she was making. "Children who go through scary experiences often have bad dreams about them. It's completely normal." "But inefficient," Zara noted. "His sleep cycles are disrupted, which affects his daily functioning. On my world, we would simply remove the traumatic memories." Elena stopped stirring and looked at Zara with surprise. "You can do that? Just erase memories?" "Of course. Painful experiences serve no logical purpose once they have been cataloged for future reference. Why would anyone choose to retain emotional suffering? Because those experiences, even the painful ones, are part of what makes us who we are," Elena said softly. "Carlos will always remember losing his mother and seeing his father get hurt. But he'll also remember that people who love him helped him through the worst times of his life. That teaches him that he's not alone in the world." Zara tilted her head, considering this. "So you deliberately preserve pain in order to appreciate support?" "Something like that." That night, Carlos had one of his worst nightmares yet. Elena was awakened by his screaming from the small bedroom she had set, up for him next to her own. She rushed in to find him sitting up in bed, crying and calling for his father. "It's okay, mijo," Elena whispered, sitting on the edge of his bed and pulling him close. "You're safe. It was just a dream." "But it felt so real," Carlos sobbed. "The car was coming again and Papa couldn't move and I couldn't help him." Elena rocked him gently, humming the same lullaby her mother had sung to her when she was small. Gradually, Carlos's breathing slowed and his grip on her pajama shirt loosened. What Elena didn't notice was that Zara had been standing in the doorway, the entire time, watching this scene with intense curiosity. When Elena finally got Carlos settled back to sleep and returned to her own room, Zara was still there. "You did not attempt to fix his problem," Zara observed quietly. There's nothing to fix, Elena whispered back. He's processing trauma. He needs comfort and time, not solutions. But you have medication that could help him sleep without dreams. You have technology that could distract him from his memories. Why do you choose the least efficient method? Elena looked at Zara for a long moment. Because sometimes, Zara, the least efficient method is the most human one. Carlos doesn't need me to fix his pain. He needs to know that someone cares enough to sit with him while he works through it. The next night, Carlos had another nightmare. This time, Elena was deep in sleep and didn't hear him right away. But Zara did. She had been in the main laboratory, working on repairs to her damaged communication device, when she heard the small sound of Carlos crying. For several minutes, Zara stood frozen in the hallway between the lab and the bedrooms. Every instinct from her logical upbringing told her to wake Elena and let her handle the situation. But something else, something new that she didn't quite understand, made her walk to Carlos's room instead. The little boy was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, but he wasn't screaming this time. He was just quietly crying, as if he had given up hope that anyone would come. Carlos, Zara said softly from the doorway. Are you experiencing a nightmare? Carlos looked up at her with wide, scared eyes. In the dim light from the hallway, Zara's silver skin seemed to glow softly, and her unusual features looked more mysterious than frightening. I don't want to wake up Tia Elena again, Carlos whispered. She needs to sleep too. Zara stepped into the room, moving with her usual, fluid grace. May I sit with you? Carlos nodded, scooting over to make room on the small bed. Zara sat down carefully, studying the child's tear-stained face with genuine concern. The nightmare was about the accident? She asked. Yes, but also about Mama. Sometimes in the dreams they both go away and leave me all alone. Carlos wiped his nose with his good hand. Do you have bad dreams, Zara? My people do not dream the way humans do, Zara replied. But if we did, I think I would dream about being alone too. This surprised Carlos. But you're a grown-up. Grown-ups aren't scared of being alone. I think everyone is scared of being alone sometimes, Zara said. And as she spoke the words, she realized they were true. Even grown-ups, even people from other worlds. Carlos was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he asked, Do you miss your family? The question hit Zara unexpectedly. She had been telling herself for weeks that she felt no emotional attachment to her home world or her people. But sitting here in the dark with this vulnerable child, she found herself being more honest than she had been with anyone, including herself. I do miss them, she admitted quietly. But they would not understand the person I am becoming here. They would think these new feelings I am learning were a sickness that needed to be cured. That's silly, Carlos said with the straightforward logic that only children possess. Feelings aren't sick. They're just feelings. Your world has taught me that feelings can be quite powerful, Zara said. I have observed that they can make people do extraordinary things. Like how Tia Elena dropped everything to come get me. Exactly like that. Carlos snuggled closer to Zara, surprising them both. You're not scary like I thought you were, he said sleepily. You're just different, and different isn't bad. Your Tia Elena taught you that? Mama taught me that. First, she said the world is full of different kinds of people and different kinds of love, and that's what makes it beautiful. Zara felt something strange happening in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat. Your mother sounds like she was very wise. She was, and she would have liked you, I think. She always said that anyone who takes care of someone they don't have to take care of must have a really good heart. But I am not taking care of you. Elena does that. Carlos looked up at her with those innocent eyes that seemed to see more than most adults noticed. You came when I was scared. You're sitting with me now. That's taking care of me too. The simplicity of his logic was overwhelming. Zara had been so focused on the grand gestures, the obvious displays of care like Elena's sacrifice to bring Carlos home, that she had missed the smaller acts of kindness. But Carlos had noticed them all. "Would you like me to tell you about my world?" Zara offered. "It might help you think of other things besides the accident." Carlos nodded eagerly, and Zara began to describe her home planet with its 2 suns and its cities that floated in the clouds. She told him about creatures that sang with light instead of sound, and trees that grew downward from the sky instead of up from the ground. As she spoke, Zara realized that she was doing something she had never done before. She was sharing parts of herself not to exchange information, but simply to bring comfort to another being. And the strangest part was how good it felt. Carlos fell asleep halfway through her description of the crystal caves where her people stored their history. But instead of leaving, Zara remained sitting beside him, watching the peaceful rise and fall of his breathing. When Elena woke up the next morning and found them like that, Carlos curled up against Zara's side, both of them sleeping peacefully, she felt tears spring to her eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of something that felt almost like pride. Her alien friend was learning to love, and she was doing it through the fearless, open heart of a 7-year-old boy who had somehow seen past Zara's strangeness to the kindness underneath. From that night forward, everything changed. Carlos began seeking out Zara's company during the day, showing her his drawings and asking endless questions about space and other worlds. Zara, in turn, began using her advanced knowledge to create wonderful things for him: holographic butterflies that danced around his room, toys that seemed to defy gravity, and bedtime stories projected onto the ceiling like movies. But more importantly, Carlos stopped having nightmares. Or rather, when he did have them, he no longer felt alone with his fear. He knew that either Elena or Zara would come if he needed them, and that knowledge was enough to let him sleep peacefully, most nights. Elena watched this friendship develop with amazement and growing love for both of them. Carlos was healing, and Zara was becoming more human every day. They were becoming something she had never expected when she first found that crashed ship in the desert. They were becoming a family. 6 months had passed since Zara's ship crashed in the Chilean desert, and life at the research station had settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly normal. Carlos was thriving. His nightmares had mostly stopped. His broken arm had healed completely. And he was doing his schoolwork through online classes that Elena had arranged. Most importantly, he was laughing again, filling the quiet desert station with the kind of joy that Elena had almost forgotten could exist. Zara had changed too, though she might not have admitted it. She still spent hours each day working on her damaged communication equipment, trying to repair the systems that would allow her to contact her homeworld. But she also spent just as much time helping Carlos with his math homework, teaching him about the stars, and listening to his endless stories about everything from his favorite foods to his dreams about becoming a scientist like his tia Elena. Elena loved watching them together. Zara would sit with perfect posture, listening intently as Carlos explained some playground rule or cartoon character, asking serious questions as if she were attending a university lecture. Carlos, for his part, treated Zara's unusual appearance and advanced knowledge as perfectly normal, the way only children can. "Zara," Carlos asked one morning while they were eating breakfast together, "when your ship is fixed, are you going to go home?" The question hung in the air like desert dust. Elena felt her stomach clench, realizing that she had been avoiding thinking about this possibility for weeks. Zara set down her cup of tea and looked at Carlos with those large silver eyes. "That is the logical course of action," Zara said carefully. "My people will eventually come looking for me. When they do, I should return with them." "But what? If you don't want to go?" Carlos asked with the directness that only 8-year-olds could manage. Want is not a factor in logical decision-making, Zara replied, but Elena noticed that her voice sounded less certain than usual. Carlos frowned, thinking this over. That sounds really sad, he said finally. On Earth, what we want matters a lot. It's one of the most important things. Elena was about to change the subject when something impossible happened. The sky above the research station began to shimmer like heat waves, and suddenly a massive ship appeared overhead. It was nothing like Zara's small, damaged vessel. This ship was enormous, gleaming silver, and clearly designed to intimidate anyone who saw it. Zara stood up so quickly that she knocked over her chair. Her face had gone completely pale, making her silver skin look almost white. They found me, she whispered. The ship landed with barely a sound about 100 yards from the research station. Elena grabbed Carlos and pulled him close, her mind racing with questions and fears. What did these aliens want? Were they here to help Zara, or to punish her for staying on Earth so long? 3 figures emerged from the larger ship, moving with the same fluid grace that Zara possessed, but somehow appearing much more intimidating. They were taller than Zara, their features sharper, and they wore expressions of cold calculation that reminded Elena uncomfortably of how Zara had looked when she first arrived. The leader of the group approached the research station, and Elena was surprised when he spoke in perfect English. I am Commander Vex Prime 7891, he announced. We have come to retrieve our lost operative and return her to her proper function. Elena felt Carlos press closer against her side. Zara stepped forward, and Elena noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. Commander, Zara said formally, I was not expecting rescue for several more cycles. Your communication device has been broadcasting a distress signal for 2 of your months, the commander replied coldly. Did you not realize this? Elena saw Zara's face change as understanding. Hit her. The repairs she had been working on hadn't been trying to contact home. They had been accidentally calling for help this entire time. Help that she had no longer been sure she wanted. I was not aware, Zara said quietly. The commander studied her with obvious disapproval. You have been contaminated, he stated. Your behavioral patterns show clear evidence of emotional corruption. You will return with us immediately for purification treatment. Purification treatment? Elena stepped forward despite her fear. What does that mean? The commander looked at her as if she were an interesting but ultimately unimportant insect. The human female's emotional instincts have infected our operative. The treatment will remove these inefficient feelings and restore her to proper logical function. Elena felt her blood turn cold. They were talking about erasing everything. Zara had learned everything she had become. They wanted to take away her capacity for love, for friendship, for all the things that had made her more alive than she had ever been before. And if I refuse? Zara asked quietly. Refusal would indicate that the contamination is complete, the commander replied. In such cases, the operative is considered irretrievably compromised and is permanently exiled from our civilization. You would never be permitted to return home. Elena watched Zara's face as the weight of this choice settled on her. Return home and lose everything she had learned about love and connection, or stay on Earth and lose her people, her technology, her entire former life forever. Before anyone could say anything else, Carlos broke free from Elena's protective grip and ran straight to Zara. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her waist in the biggest hug he could manage. Don't go, Zara, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Please don't go. I need you here. The commander stared at this display with obvious disgust. Explain this behavior, he demanded. Carlos looked up at him with complete fearlessness. Zara is my family, he announced. She takes care of me when I have bad dreams. She helps me with my homework. She tells me stories about the stars. That's what families do. Family? The commander repeated the word as if it tasted bitter. This small human is not genetically related to our operative in any way. So what? Carlos shot back. Elena isn't my real mom either, but she loves me anyway, and Zara loves me too. That's what makes us family. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes as she watched her brave nephew stand up to beings who could probably destroy their entire planet. But what amazed her even more was watching Zara's face as Carlos spoke. Love, Zara repeated softly, and Elena could see something changing in her expression. Yes, I do love him. I love them both. The commander's face twisted with what Elena realized was not just disapproval, but actual fear. The contamination is worse than we calculated, he said. You have become completely irrational. Have I? Zara asked, and her voice was growing stronger. Or have I finally learned what my people lost when they decided that logic was more important than connection? She knelt down to Carlos's level, taking his small hands in her larger ones. Carlos, do you understand what this choice means? If I stay here with you and Elena, I can never go home again. I will be alone in the universe except for the family I choose here on Earth. Carlos looked at her with those wise eyes that seemed too old for his young face. But you won't really be alone, he said simply. You'll have us, and we'll have you. That's what families do. They stick together. Elena watched as Zara closed, her eyes for a moment as if she were weighing everything in her heart instead of her head for the first time in her life. When she opened them again, her decision was clear. Commander, Zara said, standing up but keeping one hand on Carlos's shoulder. I hereby reject your offer of rescue and choose exile from our people. The commander stepped back as if she had struck him. You would choose these primitive emotional attachments over the advancement of our entire civilization. I would choose love over logic, yes, Zara said firmly, because these primitive emotional attachments have taught me something that our advanced civilization never could. They have taught me what it means to truly be alive. Elena felt her heart swell with pride and love for this amazing being who had become so much more than just a visitor from another world. Zara had become family, and she had chosen to stay. The commander looked at all three of them with undisguised contempt. So be it, he said coldly. You are hereby exiled from our people. Your name will be removed from our records. You will never be permitted to return. I understand, Zara replied calmly, and I accept these terms willingly. As the alien ship prepared to leave, Carlos tugged on Zara's hand. Are you sad? He asked. About not being able to go home? Zara looked down at him, then at Elena, then at the small research station that had become something she never expected to find among the stars. No, she said with a smile that was becoming more human every day. I am not sad at all, because I am home. The ship disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a strange family of three standing together in the desert dust, holding on to each other and the love they had chosen over everything else. 2 years had passed since the day Zara chose love over logic, and the research station in the Chilean desert had transformed into something that looked more like a real home. Elena had built an addition to House Zara's advanced equipment, which had proven invaluable to her research. Carlos had his own room now, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars that Zara had created using her technology and drawings that showed their unusual family adventures. Miguel had recovered completely from his injuries and visited them every few months. At first, he had been worried about his son living in such an isolated place with an alien being, but after spending just 1 weekend watching Zara patiently help Carlos with a science project while Elena prepared dinner, he understood that his boy was in the best possible hands. She's good with him, Miguel had told Elena during that first visit. Different, obviously, but good. Carlos has never been happier. And it was true. Carlos, now 10 years old, had grown into a confident, curious child who spoke 3 languages fluently and could explain the basic principles of space travel to anyone who would listen. More importantly, he had learned that families could take many different forms, and that love was the only thing that really mattered in defining who belonged together. Zara had changed the most of all of them. She still possessed all her advanced knowledge and logical thinking abilities, but she had learned to balance them with emotional understanding. She laughed at Carlos's jokes, worried when Elena worked too late, and had even started what she called inefficient but pleasant habits like keeping a garden and watching the sunset each evening. The biggest change came when Elena received a call from the university offering her a position that would require them to move to the city. For the first time since Zara's arrival, they faced a major decision as a family. "I don't want to leave," Carlos said immediately when Elena explained the opportunity. "This is our home. All my stuff is here. And what about Zara's lab?" Elena looked at Zara, who had been unusually quiet during the discussion. "What do you think?" "The city would have better schools for Carlos, and I could do more advanced research with the university's resources. The logical choice would be to accept the position," Zara said slowly. "The benefits outweigh the disadvantages from a practical standpoint." "But what do you want?" Carlos asked, using the same direct approach that had always worked with Zara. Zara was quiet for a long moment, looking around at the home they had built together. "I want what makes our family happiest," she said finally. "If that means moving to the city, then we will adapt. If it means staying here, then we will make it work. The location is not what makes this place home." Elena felt her heart swell with love for both of them. "Then we stay," she decided. "I can do my research from here and collaborate with the university remotely. This is where we belong." The decision turned out to be perfect. Elena's work, enhanced by Zara's knowledge, began attracting international attention. Scientists from around the world started visiting their remote station to collaborate on projects that seemed to bridge the gap between human understanding and advanced alien technology. Carlos thrived in this environment, learning from some of the brightest minds on Earth while maintaining the close family bonds that had shaped his recovery from trauma. He became something of a local celebrity when news outlets discovered the story of the boy being raised by a human aunt and an alien guardian. But he handled the attention with remarkable maturity, always emphasizing that what made his family special wasn't that Zara was from another planet, but that they had chosen to love each other unconditionally. The real test of their family bond came during Carlos's school play. His teacher had assigned a project where each student had to present their family tree and talk about what made their family unique. Carlos had been excited about the assignment for weeks, working with Elena and Zara to create a presentation that would help his classmates understand his unusual situation. On the day of the presentation, the small school auditorium was packed with parents, grandparents, and siblings. Elena sat in the front row, nervous about how people would react to their family's story. Zara sat beside her, wearing the special clothing they had designed to help her blend in better with human society, though her silver-tinted skin and distinctive features still drew curious stares. When Carlos's turn came, he walked confidently to the front of the room carrying a poster that showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them, he had written, "Family Act Love," in his careful 10-year-old handwriting. "My name is Carlos Rodriguez," he began, his voice clear and strong. "I want to tell you about my family, which is different from most families, but also exactly the same in the most important ways." He pointed to the first stick figure. "This is my tia Elena. She's a scientist who studies life in the desert. When my papa got hurt in a car accident and couldn't take care of me for a while, Elena dropped everything to bring me home with her. She didn't have to do that, but she did it because she loves me. Elena felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as she watched her nephews speak with such confidence about their journey together. Carlos pointed to the second figure. This is me. I'm 10 years old and I like science and soccer and drawing pictures of spaceships. I used to be really sad and scared after the accident, but my family helped me feel safe again. Then he pointed to the third figure, and Elena could feel the entire room holding its breath. And this is Zara. Zara came to Earth from another planet when her spaceship crashed in the desert near our house. She was hurt and scared, just like I was when my papa got hurt. But Elena took care of her too, because that's what our family does. We take care of each other. A murmur went through the audience, but Carlos continued without missing a beat. Some people think it's weird that my family includes someone from another planet, but I think it's amazing. Zara knows things about the universe that no human has ever learned. She can create light shows that dance on the ceiling and toys that float in the air. But the most important thing about Zara isn't that she's different from us. It's that she chose to stay here and be part of our family even when her own people came to take her home. Carlos looked directly at Zara, his young face serious and full of love. Zara teaches me about the stars and helps me with my math homework and sits with me when I have bad dreams. She worries about me when I'm sick and celebrates with me when I do something good. That's what families do for each other. He turned back to his classmates and their parents. I know my family doesn't look like other families. But families aren't about looking the same or coming from the same place. Families are about choosing to love each other every single day, no matter what. The room was completely silent for a moment, and then something wonderful happened. Carlos's teacher started clapping, and then his classmates joined in. And then the entire auditorium erupted in applause. Elena saw parents wiping their eyes and children turning to whisper excitedly to each other about the amazing story they had just heard. But what mattered most to Elena was watching Zara's face as the applause continued. The alien woman who had once thought emotions were inefficient and illogical was crying tears of joy, finally understanding completely why the small human called her family. After the presentation, as families mingled and children showed off their projects, dozens of people approached them. Instead of the fear or suspicion Elena had worried about, they found curiosity, acceptance, and warmth. Carlos's classmates bombarded Zara with questions about space travel and life on other planets. Parents thanked Elena for sharing their story and told her how much it had taught their own children about accepting differences. That night, as they drove home through the desert under a canopy of stars, Carlos fell asleep in the back seat. Elena glanced over at Zara, who was looking up at the night sky with a peaceful expression. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked quietly. "Giving up your old life to stay here with us?" Zara was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same careful thought she applied to everything. "When I first arrived on Earth," she said finally, "I thought home was a place among the stars where my people lived. I thought it was about shared genetics and common culture and logical compatibility." She looked back at Carlos, sleeping peacefully with a smile on his face. "But Carlos taught me that home isn't a place you come from. Home is the place where people choose to love you exactly as you are. Home is where you feel safe to be vulnerable, where you can grow and change and become the best version of yourself." Elena felt her own eyes fill with tears as Zara continued. "My people spent thousands of years exploring the galaxy, looking for other intelligent life. They thought the greatest discovery would be finding beings like ourselves. But the greatest discovery I ever made wasn't finding another advanced civilization. It was finding a family that taught me what it means to truly be alive." As they pulled up to their small research station, their home glowing warmly in the desert darkness, Elena realized that Zara was absolutely right. They had created something more precious than any scientific discovery, more valuable than any advanced technology.